Welcome back to 6-1 Forward. Today we have City Attorney Zack Klein with us. We're going to talk about what it is the City Attorney's Office does, your vision, some of the wins, and how you got here. So before we start any of that, I actually have something. You're the only person that I have so far a picture to show. I found this last week.
Oh, wow.
This was us 15 years ago.
15 years?
Right about. Yeah.
Well, you haven't changed, and I look 15 years older.
I think we both look pretty good.
Yeah.
My hair color was a little...
You look the same.
There we go.
My hair's different, but you look
Yeah.
the same. And my hair's the same 15 years.
We're not aging. We're doing great. So 15-ish years ago, actually, we were asked this question not long ago about how it was that we met. And you answered it right. But I thought that it occurred to me, I had never shared the story about the very first time we met and the background of how I got there. And I think you'd appreciate it. So when I was a landlord and working with investors, I had the idea, because we were all complaining about the same things, about founding a landlord association. And so I talked to a couple of investors and they were on board. And I was sitting at the Pearl one night, and next to me was a gentleman who was in government relations, and I told him my idea. And he's like, "You need to talk to Larry James." And I was 30, so I had no idea who Larry James was. And I was like, that sounds great. So he introduced me, and I remember, I think I Googled Larry, and Larry said, "Sure, come on in." And he spent an hour and a half with me at his conference room talking about how to do this and his ideas around it. And for those of you who don't know who Larry James is, he is an absolute legacy person in the city of Columbus. He has done so much for the city. So he encouraged me to keep going, and I did. And so I had a friend who was in PR who said, "I'll do a press release for you and, let everyone know." I'm like, "I don't know what a press release is, but that sounds good." And she sent one to your office, to Gretchen James. And so it wasn't even 2 months later, Gretchen reached out and said the city attorney's office and city council at that time was looking at ways that they could potentially be holding landlords accountable for criminal activity of tenants, and asked if I'd be willing to come to a city council meeting to testify. And I was like, absolutely. And I had never been to city council chambers. I had no idea what I was walking into. And so I got there, and if you haven't been to the city council chambers, they're beautiful, but it's also very dark. And so there are very bright lights everywhere to try and make sure that for Columbus Public Television, it's all captured. And so Gretchen met me and sat me down, and there was my name tag. And then it was my turn to come up. And you were really, really, really nice in that you didn't ask me a lot of pressing questions or scary questions, I guess, in that moment. But as you were talking, I was catching someone out of the side of my eye who was really concentrating and kind of grinning. And I could tell that I was going to be in for it when it got to his turn. And it was then City Attorney Rick Pfeiffer. Mm-hmm. And I remember when you wrapped up, I was so ill-prepared for that moment with City Attorney Pfeiffer, who I have the most respect for. But talk about one of the smartest people. And you had to be on your toes, quick on your toes. And he got ready, and it was just like going into an Olympic game with him. And I remember thinking, this is on TV. This is the scariest moment maybe of my life. I have no idea what's happening. And the very last question he said, something to the effect of whether or not I agreed with it or whether or not landlords would. And I responded with, landlords are no more responsible for the activity of their tenants than you are, city attorney, for the population in Columbus. And he grinned at me, and that was the end of it. And so afterward, you came over and you were like very gracious and very kind, and you said, "Thank you for coming," all of these things. And I thought to myself, that was the beginning and end of any sort of path forward when it came to city council or being involved in politics. I wanted nothing of it. Right.
Well, good to know.
And so here we were then a month later, and we were holding a landlord meeting, and you came. And that was the picture from the following meeting where you came in and you spoke to everyone. And Rick Pfeiffer, I must have been brave enough. I asked him to come in, and he did a couple months later, and he was great. But before you got to city council, you had a long road to get to that city council meeting. And I'm wondering if you could share about your background and your trajectory.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
I think you do a great job in the community.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. So grew up in southeastern Ohio. And really before that, just real quick, I'll put a plug in. My dad built power plants for a living. And so we moved every 4 years. And so I've lived in a lot of different places. And I say Belpry's my home because we moved there when I finished 7th grade. And so like the years that I remember, when you're a teenager, 12 years old, 13 years old, moving into your teens, 8th grade in Belpry High School. Belpry's a small town on the river in southeastern Ohio. We got excited when Parkersburg, which was the big city across the river, when Parkersburg got an Outback Steakhouse, we thought we were living large because, oh my gosh, we can go to prom. We have a place to go. I get cheese fries at the Outback. But Belpry was a wonderful place to grow up. Wouldn't trade it for the world. But ended up graduating, going to Ohio State, and went to Capital Law School. I thought I was going to be a doctor, actually. I thought I was going to be a surgeon. I was a biochemistry major. And was a biochem major all the way to my senior year at Ohio State. And I got really tired of doing lab. Lab was what did me in. It wasn't the organic chemistry or the inorganic chemistry. It was analytical chemistry lab, which is because like nerd alert sort of thing going on right now, I get. But we were measuring water to like the 1,000th decibel point to make sure that your instrument is calibrated so that you can get the exact measurement. And I was like, what am I doing here? And so I ended up switching to political science. And I remember my mom and dad were like, you just spent 3 years studying biochemistry and now you're going to be a political science major. Like what was the past 3 years about? So I ended up minoring in math because I was like 2 classes away from a minor in mathematics. So I ended up minoring in math. And the reason I bring this up is that even when I was applying for college and was a biochem major, when you have to write those essays when you go to college, like why you want to go to college, what do you want to do with your life? I was like, I want to be a doctor, but I would love to maybe get into politics someday. So like in the back of my mind, that was like public service was something that I was always driven towards, even though I thought I was going to go to the medical route and then maybe transition into government or politics. So when I was like, well, I still wanted to be that spark of wanting to be in public service. I was like, well, all those people are lawyers, so I should just go to law school. I had no one in my family that was a lawyer, really no family friends that were lawyers. I didn't really know who to ask or to mentor about going to law school. So I just went over to the Barnes & Noble over at the Linux, bought an LSAT book and took it like 3 or 4 weeks later. And the next thing you know, went to law school.
Was your family political? Were you exposed to politics?
We were exposed to a little bit, but we really didn't talk much about it. I mean, my parents voted,
Right.
My parents were more involved in the community and the school than they were about going to a county political party dinner or, a function. So the getting instilled with the sense of community service, like that was really driven by my parents, both for my brother and for me, because they were involved in the school so heavily, especially the athletic boosters. Because Belpry, I graduated the class of 110 people. So the high school only had like 400 or 450 kids in it. And so the parents really drove the success of the community. And there was like a school levy. I remember there was a school levy that people were like rallying around. But my mom and dad were the ones. My dad, first of all, was the assistant coach on the basketball team. And so he was my brother and I's both the assistant coach when we both played. And then my mom, she was the one where it was like working the concession stand, working the 50-50 drawing at the door, like this thing called shoot the hoop, where you buy a ticket and you get to shoot a half court shot. And if you make it, you win like a couple $100, So it was very much like you have to give back to your community. You have to help your neighbors. Like it was all driven from that. It wasn't driven from the sense of like a Republican versus Democrat or go for this candidate. It was more like, how do we help our community and roll up our sleeves in our kids' school? And that was really what drove my like foundation of what it's like to be involved in the community and the importance of community. But my interest in politics actually goes all the way back to 4th grade.
Did you run for?
What's that?
Did you run for something?
Well, it was a mock election. And so this is like, I think so important, like for the values of teachers. Like my 4th grade teacher really, I think, shaped the trajectory of my life. She, in 1988,
Here we go.
A long time ago, in 1988, it was Bush versus Dukakis. It was the presidential race, right? And so we had to, in the 4th grade class at St. Mary's, elementary school. She like put like Bush, Quayle, Dukakis, Benz, all these people, like the vice president, president running, the campaign manager Bush, and everyone just went in and drew something out of the hat. And then we had a mock election at the school where you had to like make signs. Well, I ended up drawing out of the hat George Bush Sr. So I played George Bush in the 1988 fourth grade mock election because that's the one I pulled out of the hat. And I remember you had to go in front of the school assembly, and it was even a smaller school. There was maybe like 100 kids in the entire school, first through eighth grade. But you had to find a policy position, and you had to give a speech, and then they had an election at the school of who won or lost. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. And then like, this is really great because you go out to like the third grade class and you had to give your pitch, and then the seventh grade class and give your pitch. And that just like, it really was something that left a important impact on me. I was like, not only is this fun, but I'm like researching a policy. Like, what does that really mean? I'm like fourth grade,
right.
But it left a really important impact on me. And I really harkened back to my interest in politics. Now I had my interest in politics, fourth grade, my love and the importance of getting involved in the community, my parents. Like that combination, I think, is what helped me steer me into like going into where I am today, going into politics and being very fortunate to be the city attorney.
Well, I think for me, knowing you, but also being around you as city attorney Zack Klein, you had invited me to do the presentation for your entire office. And it struck me, we don't hear it very often anymore, but you said at the beginning of that, it's our civic duty to know and to understand what is happening in Central Ohio and in Columbus. And it hit me in that moment. When was the last time I heard anybody talk about civic duty, but talk about it when they're not in front of a camera, when it is their authentic self, really kind of driving the culture and leading an office? So I see where that has layered into your office and your role now in an authentic way. But I'm curious about how you then went from Capitol, because your story is very interesting from that point forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I've been very fortunate along the way. I went to Capitol Law School, ended up clerking for a couple federal judges, and during one of my clerkships, I really wanted to meet this guy named Rich Cordray. So Rich Cordray, real brief kind of footnote backstory. He was 5-time Jeopardy champion, which is like the most interesting fact.
True.
Yeah, he won Jeopardy. It's back when you only could win 5 times. So he like won the max at the time. So he's a 5-time Jeopardy champion. He clerked, very brilliant guy, very dedicated public servant, clerked for like 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices. Most people would give their left arm to clerk for one, but like, why not do 2? And then he was the treasurer of the state of Ohio, which is an elected position. And his wife was a law professor at Capitol. And I didn't know her. She was on sabbatical when I was at Capitol, so I didn't really get a chance to have her class, but knew a lot of professors that knew her. But I wanted to meet Rich because here's a brilliant lawyer, a good person, dedicated public servant, and in politics. And so I asked him if, through intermediaries, through his wife and other law professors that I know, I was like, can I meet with Rich and maybe buy him a cup of coffee? And so that's what happened. He gave me 15 minutes of his time when he was treasurer of the state of Ohio, and just got to know him. And I said, hey, like my clerkship was getting ready to come to an end, and I was just trying to think like what's next, because most clerkships, just as an FYI, like their terms. Okay. People are either career clerks or the clerkship is 1 or 2 years. So mine was getting ready to come to an end. I had maybe 7 weeks left at the time. And I said, hey, I'm just trying to explore opportunities. I really respect, everything that you've accomplished. And he was like, yeah, great. Let's stay in touch. Next thing you know, the Ohio Attorney General at the time resigns, and it was Mark Dan. So he resigns as the Attorney General, and there's an open seat. And Governor Strickland, appoints Nancy Rogers to be the Attorney General, but Nancy was not going to run for AG. So Rich ran for AG. So Rogers was just kind of a placeholder until the election took place. And Rich called me out of the blue and was like, hey, I remember we had coffee. You want to get involved in politics. Do you want to travel the state with me? Do you want to be my driver, be my, hold my bag, help me write speeches, help me do whatever, just kind of be like a gopher for the campaign? And I was like, sure. Sounds like a great opportunity, because my clerkship was ending. I needed something to do. And so it was a 6-month special election in 2008. And so I drove around the state with Cordray, just me and him in his minivan. Got to know him pretty well because it was just us. We put like 22,000 miles on his minivan in 6 months. But there was also this guy named Barack Obama, and he was running for president at the time in 2008. And it was really cool because we were the only, because it was a special election, we were the only statewide elected official on the ballot with Barack Obama. In 2008, Ohio mattered in the presidential election. So the Obamas, they were here all the time. And so we got to go to all these really amazing events, behind the scenes. Rich spoke before Obama took the stage, or Michelle Obama, or Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, it doesn't matter who it is, like all these major Democratic supporters of Obama and the president, Jay-Z, Bruce Springsteen. So it was a really great experience. Not all campaigns are like that, by the way. Yeah, I got a little spoiled in the 6 month special election driving around with Rich Cordray hanging out with Barack Obama, which, by the way, I did not hang out with Barack Obama. But it was just a great experience. But that's when so Rich won that race, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go transition and go work in the Attorney General's office, because I got to know Rich. What a great person. I'd love to work for him. And that's when I got a call to go work for Biden. So I got a call to work at the White House for then Vice President Biden.
How old were you?
I have to do the math. It was 2009. It's 2025. So how many years ago was that? 16 years ago, and I'm 46, so I was 30 years old. Yeah.
What is it like to be 30 years old and get a phone call about working for the vice president? What was that phone call, and what was it?
It was incredible. My wife is a shoe buyer at DSW, and she works really hard in her own right and worked up through the ranks. She's still with DSW. But I remember I got the call to go work at the White House, and I was like, Jenny, I just got this opportunity to go work at the White House in DC with Obama and Biden. And she's like, wow, that's really great. Like, you should go do that. I'm not giving up buying shoes for a living. And I was like, okay. And so I flew back and forth every weekend for a year. And it was really hard. It was a grind, both financially and personally. Every Monday morning, 6 a.m. flight, Columbus to BWI, because I couldn't afford to fly into Reagan. Every Friday night at like the 10 p.m. flight, BWI to Columbus. I did that, I would say 50 weeks out of the 52 weeks-ish I was there. And it was a great opportunity, though. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had a blue badge. I attended all the senior staff meetings with like a lot of the advisors that were still with Biden when he became president. Got to know them really well. Flew on Air Force 2. Yeah, it's the only time I ever flown private. Flying on Air Force. I mean, it is a government plane, but I was like, I usually fly commercial. But it was just a great opportunity. And I tell you, just the sense of awesome that when you're inside the gates of the White House and you see people standing at Pennsylvania and 16th, and they're standing on the gates, they're looking in, and you're like, and here you are, like, wow, and it doesn't really matter like who the president is. The fact is, like, you have this tremendous opportunity that has been given to you, especially a kid from Southeastern Ohio. To be able to go into the West Wing, to walk by the Oval Office, to go into the Rose Garden. And it was a great experience. But I did end up coming back to Columbus after the year. It was just as great as an experience as it was, wouldn't trade it for the world. It was challenging, just given the finances and the personal commute and everything.
So you did that for 1 year?
I did.
I've never asked you, but I'm curious. Did you watch Veep?
I've seen episodes of Veep.
Just episodes?
Yes, I've seen episodes of Veep. Veep is real.
That was my next...
And by the way, it doesn't matter if you're in Washington or you're at City Hall or you're in the governor's office at one of the 50 states of our union, Veep is real.
Do you know the characters?
I know some of the characters, but I wouldn't be able to. I'm more of a West Wing, even though they're two different shows. But and the West Wing is nothing like the West Wing, by the way.
Whereas Veep is...
Veep is like it's like watching The Office.
Right.
If you talk to people in corporate America, The Office is real. It's a manifestation of all the personalities, and Veep is no different. So
you wrap up your year with the vice president. You come back to Columbus, and then what happens?
Worked for Rich, the assistant attorney general. He allowed me to be cross-designated as a special assistant U.S. attorney, which is like a federal prosecutor sort of thing, which was great. Learned a lot there. And unfortunately, I was only there for a year because Rich lost. So this was 2010. And he lost, so he won the unexpired term 2008, served to 2010, had to run again in 2010 and lost. But that's when the opportunity came available to join city council. And so there were actually two vacancies, and many people applied, and I was very fortunate to get selected and became a member of city council in January of 2011 and ran that year and won, ran 4 years later in 2015 and won, and then became the city council president. And then Rick Pfeiffer, whom you mentioned, community legend, along with Larry James, community legend, Rick called me and said, "Hey, I'm retiring. You should consider, running for city attorney." And I did, and won in 2017.
2017. And you're now running again.
I am on the ballot this year for my third term, yes.
So when I've done two presentations, or had done. The first one was just for your office, the smaller group in your office. And I remember having to ask Goldie beforehand, what does the city attorney's office do? And I was so far off base for what the city attorney office does versus the prosecutor. And I think it'd be really good for you to share how you would describe what your office does.
Well, so the city attorney's office, I have 175 people that work for me. So it is a bigger office, half of whom are prosecutors. So we prosecute all misdemeanor crime in the city of Columbus. And that's everything from traffic all the way up to domestic violence and everything in between. We are not the juvenile prosecutor, and we do not prosecute felonies. That's the county prosecutor.
And why do you think it's important to make that distinction?
Well, I think in government generally, people just assume like the city and the county and the board of education, like the school system, that all kind of bleeds together. But there are different buckets of what people have control or jurisdiction over. And especially with the rise of juvenile crime, there's a lot of frustration, and rightfully so, about accountability for juveniles that have long records, that have stolen lots of cars or broken into lots of cars, and that people want to take out their frustration and ask questions, legitimate questions, to judges and prosecutors, and that's fair. And I think sometimes when people talk, they get frustrated because they want to talk to me about it, and I'm happy to talk to them, but the buck doesn't stop with me on juvenile crime. That's the county prosecutor and the county judges. But we do prosecute very serious domestic violence crimes, OVI, assaults. That does come through on the misdemeanor side to the city attorney's office. Then the other half of my team is like just running a big law firm, like you see on TV. Like there's litigation, there's real estate, there's tax, there's claims, there's labor and employment. But what does make us unique is we have a property action team. And so you may see like, shutting down drug houses, gang houses, taking on out-of-state landlords, not your landlords, out-of-state landlords. But seriously though, bad actors, taking on bad actors who don't care about the tenants, that aren't investing in their property. So we have a whole team dedicated to take on those nuisance properties. And then I started a section, that's the Solicitor General section, where we are involved in proactive litigation, which means like we are the plaintiff in a lawsuit. Because a lot of times the city of Columbus does get sued a lot, and we're the defendant, and that's what our litigation section handles. But this is a section where we are proactively filing lawsuits against the state of Ohio over home rule. And that basically means like cities should be able to control themselves when it comes to the health and safety welfare of its people. We should be able to make the laws that we think are appropriate to protect our citizenry. The mayor, the city council should do that. In Belpre, in Columbus, in Toledo, it's not a specific city, but it's a city's independent ability to act, their own autonomy. And it's also where we've been actively involved, both in Trump 1 and Trump 2, in some lawsuits against the Trump administration and DOJ, for what we believe is, illegally taking away money that has been granted to the city, or adding new terms to current grants that have already been contracted for. But this is like real money that deals with infectious disease, real money that has to do with road paving, real money that has to do with homelessness, money that goes to our police department for counterterrorism operations. So like this is real jobs, real impact on public safety and health in our community. And so we've been involved in those lawsuits too.
How many current lawsuits against the Trump administration does the city of Columbus have?
I think seven.
Wow. Way more than I thought.
Yeah.
So as you look back since you've taken this office, what are some of the things that you're most proud of, or can you point to that have made a difference or are different than what maybe your predecessor had done?
I mean, there's a lot because I have such an amazing team.
You do.
I mean, it really, like, I'm the weakest link. Like, they are the most brilliant lawyers who are dedicated public servants that could be making a lot of money in the private sector, and they just love helping people. And I think that's why we all like get into government at some point, whether that's as an elected official or working for government. It's like, how do we get a chance to make a difference and help people? And I can tell you, like, local government has a significant opportunity for impact, and that's nothing against the state or the feds, but we can help people if the dump truck doesn't pick up your trash, all the way up to a drug house on our street, to crime in our neighborhood, and everything in between. And that's why I love local government. And, when I look at the city attorney's office, the work that we've done, like in the criminal justice space, for example, I think we've done a good job of where I think criminal justice needs to be. And that is, how do you separate violent offenders? How do you separate people who have no regard for the law? And like, they have a different level of accountability, which can include jail and should include jail for a lot of these people, because these are domestic violence abusers. These are very violent people. Thankfully, they're a small number, but how do you separate them as a prosecutor to people, which is the larger number of nonviolent offenders, infrequent offenders, people that need help? And how do you create programs for people that need help? So I feel like over so many years in the past decades, it's been kind of an all or nothing. Like, everyone should go to jail, and that's wrong. Everyone should not go to jail. That's wrong. Like, as with most things, like, it is nuanced, and you have to be able to put in systems and procedures in place so that you're calling the kind of the balls and strikes of, hey, violent people who have no regard for the law deserve to have accountability. Accountability also can be for nonviolent offenders and people that need help. That accountability may not mean jail. It may mean a diversion program, may mean giving them help, helping them find addiction services or rehabilitation services, or a job, or where their local food pantry is. And that's like, we created, the first of its kind diversion program in the country for nonviolent, infrequent offenders that we actually partner with a third-party healthcare organization. That these defendants, they answer 32 questions, and if they stole from Kroger or their supermarket, like the questions identify, like, well, why?
Right.
Why did you steal? Well, is it food insecurity? Is it lack of job? Is it housing? Is it employment? Whatever it is it drug addiction, mental health? But each person gets an individualized, tailored plan with a social worker to help them get to the resources they need. And we've had a wild success with this, because, like, if you get to the root of the why people are committing crime, then they don't commit crime anymore if you can treat the why. And so being able to separate violent and nonviolent is really important. And I'm proud of the work that we've done there. We've been very aggressive in our neighborhoods, cleaning up really bad businesses that are taking advantage of people, drug houses where gangs, violence, guns, drugs, and that's, no family should ever have to live next to one of those places. And we have been very aggressive in cleaning up our neighborhoods, been very aggressive taking on, like, large apartment complex owners that have been taking advantage of the tenants who are doing their duty on the contract of landlord tenant, right? They're paying their rent every month, but the landlord's living in California, New York, and is pocketing it, and it's an unsafe place, it's an unclean place. And we've taken them to court and taken them to task, and been very successful in that. The lawsuits that we've had against the Trump administration, I think, are and against the state of Ohio on guns, have been very important. And then the work that we've done with police. We are the lawyers for the Division of Police, and we have a wonderful police department who are really hard, dedicated men and women to the Division of Police. But how do you support them? Because people want good, quality policing in their neighborhoods. I reject the idea, the whole defund the police movement. I think that's baloney. I think people want police. Some communities want more police. But the reality is they want good quality policing, and working with the executive leadership, who I love and think are doing a great job. How do we support them in a way to deliver good quality policing? Because we're all after the same thing of just strong and safe neighborhoods.
What does your vision for the office look like should you win re-election?
Well, one of the biggest things right now we're having community conversations about is in the domestic violence space. My office, unfortunately, prosecutes 5,000 to 6,000 domestic violence cases a year. So just the city of Columbus, there's 5,000 to 6,000 domestic violence cases a year. And one thing that we have noticed in talking just as being practitioners, but also community advocates for domestic violence survivors and victims, is how confusing the system is for individuals in a one of the toughest times in their life, they may have to go to the common police court for a protection order. Their case may be in municipal court for a DV. Then maybe the same abuser may pick up a strangulation, which then goes back to the common police court. It can be incredibly frustrating and confusing of where and which court people need to go to. So how do you have a centralized location and the possibility of even a domestic violence court? That would be the kind of the first of its kind in Ohio, where the jurisdiction would be all the DV cases or DV related cases. You can get your protection order from one judge or two judges in a one-stop shop, and then you can build around the wonderful community benefit services that we have, and all in a place in one location, so that abusers who are already, dazed and confused because of the abuse and trauma don't have to bounce around to 5 different buildings and different floors. It's like, that's one thing that I'm looking forward to, like having a community conversation about that, because it's not a prosecutor decision. It really is a community decision. It involves the county, the city, the state, the Ohio Supreme Court, the General Assembly, the judges, defense counsel. Like, it involves a lot of different players, but how do you initiate using the opportunity I have as city attorney to promote that conversation and see if this is something the community wants to do? I think it'd be great for the community, but I'm just one person.
It'd be interesting to watch, perhaps even going through that process as a victim of abuse, to see where to streamline it and how to make it simple and compassionate along the way.
Yeah.
That's going to be exciting to see. Before we wrap up, though, I do think we have to talk about basketball.
Okay.
And your trajectory and your story around basketball. And I know people know you have some sort of connection to it, but there's a lot of really funny stories and good stories about Zack Klein and basketball. And one of them was the Butler story you just recently shared, which I had not heard that before, but I think it's a fun one. And then how that's kind of followed you through your life up until this point and your professional life.
Like I said, I grew up in Southeastern Ohio.
And were you one of the tallest in your graduating class?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I was the tallest, but I was one of the tallest for sure. And when you're 6'5", and in the 90s in Southeastern Ohio, you're automatically playing the center basketball.
Right.
It's like, you're just going directly to the paint.
Was your high school team good?
We were pretty good. We played in the state championships my senior year.
That's pretty, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but long story short was, we only had, I think, 7 kids on the team. And we were riddled with injury throughout the year. So we had to pull up freshmen and JV to play just so we would have a team. But we were really good. And it wasn't until the last couple games of the season where all of us were finally healthy. So we finished the regular season my senior year 8-12. So everyone was like, well, you guys are terrible. You're 8-12. But then we went to sectionals, districts, and regionals, and we probably won every game by an average of 20 points and ended up playing in the state championships. Like, we were really good. We were just hurt. And then finally we were able to kind of come together, and we played at St. John's back in the final years that I used to play at St. John's. And we sold out the arena because we're playing a team that was, I think, 22-0. And at that point, given our wins, I think we were 14-12. And so everyone's like, how is this 14-12 team playing against this 22-0 team or something? And we ended up losing in the Final Four, but it was just a great opportunity and a lot of fun for a little town in Belpre. But yeah, so I loved basketball. I went to Butler for a year and a half. I thought I was going to maybe play basketball at Butler. Got a call like, hey, you should try out for the team. We're going to take one walk on. We're going to invite a couple of you to try to try to walk on. And I played AAU and stuff, but like, again, Southeastern Ohio, it's a little bit different. So I got this is, by the way, before Butler was good. I want to preface this. It's like, this isn't like Butler like playing in the Final Four. This is years before that. And so I get partnered with this guy, lovely fella, who, from what I understand, could have went to Michigan or Notre Dame to play linebacker. Oh. So he was a big dude. But he loved basketball so much, he went to Butler. And he beat the living hell out of me for 2 hours. And I learned probably in the first 3 minutes of practice that, like, I am not a Division I athlete.
Turns out.
And then what the icing on the cake was afterward, we went to the weight room. And like anyone who's sympathizing with me here, if you're sympathizing, like, unless you wrestled or played football, no one did weights in the 90s, okay? Now it's a real big part of of sports. It wasn't in the 90s, okay? At least in Southeastern Ohio, wrestling and football aside. And so he must have put on what seemed to be, in my eyes, 600 pounds to bench press. And he's like, "Hey, spot me." And I'm like, "Sir, I don't think I can properly spot you." But this is where kind of like in a weird way, full circle. Then assistant coach Thad Mata, who was at Butler, I went up to him and I was like, "Coach, I appreciate the opportunity, but this is not for me." And then obviously Thad went to Xavier and then became Ohio State's coach. I ended up not playing basketball at Butler, but I did get involved in refereeing.
Right.
So it was my randomly selected roommate at Butler, the guy that I was living with. He was from the Indianapolis area, and we needed a couch for our little dorm room. And he had a family friend who had an extra couch, and he was delivering it. And we were, kind of bummed out. He's like, "Why are you guys so bummed out?" I'm like, "Well, we don't have any money. We're poor." Like, the song of every college student.
Right.
And he's like, "Well, you guys both played high school basketball, right?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I referee high school basketball in Indiana." He's like, "You should go take the test, and then I can get you hooked up with refereeing third and fourth graders on the weekends, and you make like $20 or $25 cash. You referee like the game's on the hour, like 8:00, and they just you go and you make a little bit of money, and you'll have money for the week." And we're like, "Sounds like a good idea." So we took the test, and we got licensed to referee. I was still at Butler, and we started refereeing in third and fourth grade. And just kind of ran up and down the court and made a little extra money. And it was great. And then when I transferred to Ohio State, I really enjoyed refereeing. So I called the intramural department and said, "Hey, I'm licensed to referee in Indiana. Can I do intramurals here at Ohio State?" And they said, "Sure." And so I started refereeing intramurals and started refereeing like itty bitty kids in the Columbus area when I was at Ohio State. And then next thing you know, people were like, "You're not a bad referee. You call a lot of the calls right." And I met people, and there's a whole other podcast on the refereeing subculture.
That's next.
But yeah, that's for like part 2 or 3. Needless to say, people saw me referee, and I got offered these opportunities. I refereed in the NBA Summer League in Vegas for a couple years, refereed in the NBA Minor League. It was called the D League then, now it's called the G League. And spent 20 years refereeing Division I women's college basketball. Refereed in the ACC, the Big East, American, Conference USA, MAC, Horizon, Atlantic 10, and got to see a lot of really cool schools and met some of my best friends that I have today were referees that I just randomly met. They were somewhere in my wedding that I'm still close with, but it was just a great opportunity.
But that's not the end of the road with basketball, because you actually coach.
I've retired from basketball, and I am now the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade diocese Immaculate Conception coach with my assistant coach, my mom.
Correct.
And so my mom and I may have won a couple titles. I'm just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there.
I mean, I'm not surprised with your mom.
Yes, she's more competitive than I am. But it was great. I coached my daughter, and then a couple of the other dads. My son's in 4th grade. So 4th, 5th. He'll be in 5th grade next year. I'll coach him too.
So, what has coaching Stella and 3rd, 4th, all of those different age levels, what has that taught you as an adult?
You learn a lot about yourself, and I've learned not a lot of it's good.
Right, exactly right. The patience part of it.
My brother and I won the parent lottery.
Yes, you did.
Like we had my dad unfortunately passed away during COVID, unexpectedly, way too soon. But my mom still around, and we're a very close family. But they sacrificed everything for us. They gave us everything. And I just I look, how can I be half as good as my parents were to my brother and I, that I can be to my kids? And that's what I look back, and it's like, whenever I'm frustrated, I'm just like, I know my dad wouldn't do this. So like my reality check of when I'm coaching 4th, 5th, and 6th grade girls, or my 4th grade son, it is always like when I'm pissed off or like angry, I always take a deep breath, and I was like, like not like what would Jesus do, is like what would dad do?
What would dad do?
Yeah, because my dad was just like a gentle giant. And if you met my mom, she talked for both of them, but my dad was just a great person, and he's the one that should be coaching. It should be my mom and my dad should be coaching Stella and Rocco, but unfortunately he's not with us anymore. But you learn a lot about yourself, about patience, but it's also like it's so much fun just to see the girls grow over the course of the season, the boys grow over the course of the season. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I think your mom would make a really good candidate for office.
Yeah, get her on the podcast.
I might see if she's next. Before we go today, there is one thing that came up in the news last week. J.D. Vance had mentioned Columbus being a lawless city. And I personally feel, it's okay if someone from Columbus or who lives here criticizes it. It's like a family member. Like I don't mind that, but I take a little bit of offense to someone who's not here making such a bold statement that, in my opinion, is untrue. Can you talk about what your response to that is and what the facts are behind? Is the city of Columbus a lawless place?
The city of Columbus is not a lawless place. The city of Columbus is actually an incredibly safe place. When you look at all of the major crime statistics, they're all heading south and
Right.
in a positive direction. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not perception issues. There's not a high-profile event in a heavily populated area that then drives a narrative that people may believe that it's unsafe, but the data just proves that it's not. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't deal with the perception. And we have to deal with the perception of crime in the city of Columbus because people need to feel safe. You can't have a successful city unless you have a safe city, and people need to feel safe in their city. And so I think we as city leaders always have our work cut out for us. Every city does to address the perception of safety. But I will say, about the Vance comment specifically, like, first of all, as I said, it's just false. It's just not true. And even I was on a previous interview a couple weeks ago, and I was told, haven't heard it myself, but I was told by the interviewee with one of the news stations that Senator Marino said something very similar and asked me for my response. And like the reality is, like, I don't know Bernie Moreno, I don't know J.D. Vance. I have met with and do know John Husted.
Sure.
I feel like there is a significant disconnect between Washington and I can only speak for Columbus, so I'll say Washington and Columbus, that in a lot of ways it's us versus them. It doesn't feel like it's a partnership.
That's right.
And I would like to meet with Senator Marino. I not that I wouldn't like to meet with Vance, but Vance is the Vice President of the United States.
Sure.
Marino is a Ohio senator, so I kind of pick on him because he's an Ohio senator. But like, we need to develop relationships so that we can work together. We need advocates in D.C. that will help us support our mission. That doesn't mean that we agree on everything. I'm not suggesting that we all sing Kumbaya every hour of the day. We can have very tough disagreements, but you have to have the relationships because they are our emissaries in Washington to help us get funding,
Sure.
to understand that some of the decisions the Trump administration are making when it comes to federal cuts is really impactful to our division of police, for example. And we just need stronger partnerships with Washington. And again, it doesn't need to be kumbaya every moment, but it does need to be a healthy dialogue of how we can work together, because at the end of the day, we all serve the same people. We all serve, the people that vote for me as city attorney are also voting for U.S. Senate. And I welcome those partnerships. Like, our government is built on partnership and compromise and working together. And when you look how screwed up and dysfunctional our government is now, it's because maybe it's because of social media, maybe because it's for other things, we've adopted this us versus them
That's right.
mentality instead of an American mentality of how do we agree where we can, find commonality, work together, and get shit done.
That's
Because
it.
at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. People are thirsty for leadership. They want to get shit done. And we have this really great opportunity now to do it. We just need the strong partnerships and an open mind to get it done.
We close every podcast with the question of, how would you describe, or what is your definition of the Columbus way?
I think this is a great interlude because
Right.
the Columbus way is just that. It's stacking hands to tackle really big problems. And it is unique to Columbus. I know it's trite as the Columbus way saying may be, and people may use it a lot and run it into the ground. I've know a lot of city attorneys and other elected officials around the country, and the mere fact that our labor community, business community, government community, faith community, we come together and we're not afraid to come together and we're proud of coming together to solve big problems. Like, that is how we succeed as a community. And there are big problems in this community: housing, our education system, the perception of crime, the transportation of people as this region continues to grow. None of those can be solved solely by City Hall or solely by government. We have a big role to play, but we cannot solve it solely there. We have to have the business communities to step up with their expertise and their dollars and their time and their treasure. We need the faith community and labor and our neighborhood leaders to stack hands to solve big problems. And that's why I'm bullish about the future of the city, because we have this blueprint to get it done, and we will get it done only for the benefit of everyone that we serve.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here, and best of luck in November. We'll be following along until then.
Thank you for having me on. It's great.
Thank you.